Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author, and this is episode 608. In today's episode, I am talking with an amazing speaker and coach, Alex Pursglove. Alex guides women in becoming fully expressed and cultivating radical trust to elevate business growth while living with more ecstasy in daily life. As a master coach, Alex has helped hundreds of women across the world with accelerating in business and more opportunity, and more importantly, learning how to accept and love their most authentic selves. She is a speaker and contributor to Authority Magazine, and she has been featured on the Speak stage in New York, as well as in Brains Media and Sway. She lives in Austin with her beloved husband, Adam, and their daughter, Stella Love. All right, you're going to love this conversation, everybody. Let's do this. Alex, I am so excited to welcome you to the Big Talk podcast. It has been a long time coming. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tricia. I have been so excited about this.
We scheduled this interview more than a year ago, if you can believe that. And that's not only because Alex is busy working, running a company, raising a family, moving, all of the things, but it's also because we book out so far in advance with our incredible speakers. And I did not want to miss the opportunity to get to have this conversation with you. So thank you for being patient with us. And I can't wait to dive in.
Same here, Tricia. I truly trust in divine timing. So I believe this is happening exactly when it's meant to, and that we're going to have some really juicy conversation because of it today.
Absolutely. And let's say that we had this interview a year ago. Everything that you're about to share today would not have happened yet. So I know that this conversation is going to be in massive service of our listeners. What I want to start with is taking you back, as far back as you want to go, to what led you here today with me in this very moment.
Mm. Well, I think as far back as I want to go, where it really starts for me, Tricia, is, which you're familiar with the story, but I'm excited to share with your listeners. When I was 23 and working in the film industry, actually in Dallas, Texas, I received a phone call one night from my doctor's office, and they told me that I had a solid pseudopapillary tumor with cancerous tissue in my pancreas. And at 24 years old, that was such a shock to me, not what I was expecting. And I remember going home that evening and just falling to my knees on my bathroom floor. And I was in such a state of fear that I just completely surrendered to divine guidance and said, I don't even know what to do right now. Help me, comfort me. What do I do? And in those hours on my bathroom floor, it became really clear to me what was important in my life and what wasn't. And what I realized was that the things that I'd been doing to sort of check off the boxes to prove my value and worth to others, to try to feel good about myself, like working in the film industry, pursuing my dreams, being in this relationship I was in with a high profile entrepreneur at the time, living this lavish lifestyle. None of that actually mattered to me because it was not aligned with who I really am. And it was things that I was doing to try to seek approval and acceptance from other people, but not actually aligned with my true desires. And so I saw that what really did matter to me was, one, wanting to be really connected to divine, unconditional love and to God and the universe. And then also wanting to have a lot more significance in my life, wanting to live my life with a lot more purpose and do the things that I actually felt excited about doing. And so from that experience, while it was really challenging and tender at the time, it ended up completely changing the course of my life to give me that kind of clarity. And so I was very blessed to find out my tumor was incredibly rare. It was non-aggressive. I was cured from surgery. And then a few months after I recovered, I left my relationship, which was also very toxic and had left my self-worth at an all-time low. So I left that relationship, left the film industry, moved back to Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from initially, and started this 12-year quest to learning how to live my most fully expressed life, how to follow my true desires, how to live connected to God and my higher self, and how to really express myself in a way that's in service to other people. And so that's really where the journey started. Obviously, a lot has happened in between and over those last 12 years. But that was the first sort of extreme course correction that eventually led to me starting my coaching business, pursuing personal growth, spiritual evolution, and really ultimately going deeper and deeper and connecting to my highest self and learning more and more about who I really am so that I can follow my true desires and live my purpose.
That's incredible. And I know that that was a catalyst for you finding and using your voice. What kind of consciousness did you have around it at that time, and or when you look back as the Alex now on the Alex then, what can you tell us, what can you share with our listeners about what it meant to find your voice and to, using your language, leave your relationship, leave your career in the pursuit of unconditional love, God, source, and purpose?
Mm-hmm. Well, at that time, to be honest, I actually had pretty limited consciousness in terms of really understanding who I really am and seeing the patterns in me that were old stories or old family patterns, keeping me, stuck or limited. All I knew at that time was that I was so unhappy and so scared when that happened, and I thought I didn't know how much time I had left. All I knew was that I wanted a change, and so I knew that, or I'll say I made this commitment to myself that night that I was going to use this to change my life for the better. And so I really just followed that commitment. I followed what I didn't want. I allowed myself to start, sacrificing and letting go of what I didn't want. And that opened up more space for me to keep stepping more and more into what I did want. But it took time because, like I said, my consciousness was still had a lot of room for growth. I was still a big people pleaser. I was still a self-sacrificer. I still had a lot of doubt and imposter syndrome. And so as I continued moving forward, I was getting more and more into alignment with who I am and finding my voice. But that was an evolution. That was a journey, and it's still a journey. It's still always evolving, right? We're always coming to more and more depths, right, of our true message and what we want to share. So once I got into the coaching industry and personal development and started really coming to see the truth of my patterns that were slowing me down, that were stifling my full expression, and when I started releasing more and more of those, that's when I would say I really found so much more of my authentic voice.
Mm, that is so beautiful. For those of you who are watching and listening, Alex is a former client of mine and part of my incredible community, and one of the most intentional women, human beings I've ever met. Everything you say, everything you write, there is deep intention and clarity around that. And you came to me way in the middle of your personal growth journey with a lot of consciousness. And within our time together, which started by simply having an email relationship, within our time together, when we weren't yet working together, you would share your thoughts and you would share your desires. And you're so intentional and you are so clear about how to use your voice. And what I think is really fascinating, and I want you to speak to this for our listeners, is that even with your high level of consciousness, your connection to God and source, your understanding of who you are in the world, you're now married, you have a daughter, you still weren't sure what you had to say mattered. And that was the most surprising part of meeting you, because you come to the work incredibly accomplished. You've got an awesome group of clients that you serve. You are a very well-known presence in the space and on social media. You have a podcast, and there was still this uncertainty around the power of using your voice. And that is a very vulnerable thing for me to say to the audience and listeners, but I know that you can speak to that because it was true for you. And I want them to see themselves in you. So, would you speak to that a little bit in service of our listeners?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you are sharing this, Tricia, and that you're providing this space. That's one of the things I just love about you. You provide these judgment-free spaces to have real conversations. So thank you for creating that space and safety here for us to talk about it. And with that, that actually ties into what I want to share, because our work together created this just incredible experience breakthrough for me, in really going from, I would say, having a mental understanding. Like logically, I understood that what I had to say matters, and I would hear you say all the time, right? Your voice matters. Your voice matters. It can, telling your message, right, can even save a life. And I would hear that and logically agree, yes, I believe her. But my heart wasn't really owning yet that what I had to say matters. It hadn't gone into full embodiment yet. And so from our work together, I had this amazing experience, that I'm still continuing to process, but also now comfortable sharing because it feels like just such an important experience. So this past fall, when you and I were working together, and I was at this point of, working on the embodiment of believing what I had to say matters. I ended up booking an opportunity to speak at Speak Health in New York, and an incredible platform. And Speak is all about sharing your ideas through personal storytelling. And so I was reflecting on the story that I wanted to share, and what aspects of it I wanted to share. And I remember I was actually working on it on an airplane. And during the flight, I was just like crossing everything out. And I was in that like, oh no, this isn't it. This isn't it. Like, yeah, I've got the high level, but I didn't feel like I really had what I wanted to share. And then I got this awareness that, and just sudden inspiration that I really wanted to address, having grown up in an angry home and having experienced, yelling with my father and some of the ramifications of that. And I hadn't spoken about that publicly. I've talked to clients about it before, but never on a public stage. And so I had the inspiration, and then my people pleaser came up and said, but what is your family going to think? How would your dad feel about this? You can't talk about this publicly. And so all the but what ifs came up, understandably so. And at that moment, I thought, but I do remember what Tricia says about how people, when you share what you're inspired to share, there are people out there who need to hear that message. And so I thought to myself, so many of the women I work with have experienced angry homes, or their own struggles with inner criticism, or struggles with, letting go of family patterns. And so I just knew there were women that could relate to this message. And I felt this deep desire to talk about it because it's what was really my most authentic expression. If I'm going to talk about being fully expressed, that's a huge part of who I am and a big part of my story. So I just knew that it was aligned for me to share it. And so you and I also talked about it. And I knew that, okay, I also need to have a conversation with my father if I'm going to share about this story. And my dad and I had never talked about this before. I had never addressed it with him. And so I was tempted to not, but I knew it was in highest service. And I reminded myself of this truth that I have been really integrating into my life for years, which is that when you follow your true desires, it is in highest service to everyone. And so I said, what if I just believe that truth? So I went and talked to my father about it. And I went into the conversation knowing that if I was trying to get his approval or trying to get him to understand it, that I would show up in convincing energy. And I didn't want any of that. So I really grounded myself and said, I'm going to show up and tell him my truth and share the experience, and then receive whatever he has to say about it or however he feels. And to my surprise, we ended up having this really deep, long conversation about it. My father did receive it. There was wanting to better understand my experience. He apologized for how it affected me. He really wasn't aware of how it had affected me. And we had this beautiful conversation about it. And at the end of the conversation, I was holding his hand and listening to him. And I just felt so much compassion for my dad, and felt like we got to have this great moment of connecting. And so I went and did the talk, felt great about the talk. One of my favorite talks I've ever done. Got some great feedback from it. It helped me, get more clarity around my messaging. It just felt so aligned. And then I felt like it really mattered when I shared it, because it was my truth. It's what I really wanted to share. And then unexpectedly, 3 weeks after the talk, my father had a heart attack, and a month later he passed away. And when I got the call that he had his heart attack, I was driving to the hospital with my husband, and my very first thought was how thankful I was that I did that talk and had that experience with him, because it created this opportunity for closure that I never expected I was actually going to get with my father. And I know I messaged you about it right away and thanked you for supporting me in that, because when I reminded myself that when you follow your true desires, it's in highest service to all, I was only thinking about the audience, thinking, okay, it's going to be in service to them. It's going to be in service to them. And I never expected that it would end up being this healing experience for me and my father right before he passed away. So that experience was transformational in me going to a deeper layer of trusting in myself, my inner guidance, and in trusting in my voice and believing that what I have to say matters, and it matters in more ways than I even can see or understand.
I'm just taking this all in. I've heard, we've talked about this. We talked about it when it happened. We talked about it after it happened. We talked about it while it was happening. And hearing you tell this story again is so powerful and so tender. And you really also are sharing with us how important and urgent and the responsibility that we have to share our story. And holding back is really preventing you from the healing. Holding back is preventing your full expression, your full transformation. And even if you're scared, holding back is it's it's not even giving yourself a chance to see what's possible, and you gave yourself and your father that chance, and thankfully you have that beautiful closure. I'm just so proud of you for doing that, and for knowing that it was the right thing to do. We didn't know it was the right timing, but it was divine timing.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that you shared with me, and I'll let you tell this story, Alex, is that because you had that experience, when you were in the hospital room with your father and you knew he was transitioning, you were able to be the voice for your family and for your siblings. And I'd love for you, if you're comfortable, to share a little bit about how you were able to be that influential voice in that room for him in that moment.
Mm. Well, really, I keep coming back to the power of cultivating really deep trust in yourself and in your inner knowing, your inner guidance. That's been quite a journey for me over the last few years. It's tied into every aspect of my life and relationships, learning how to cultivate that trust. And I think because of having that powerful experience with my father and being able to reach that place of real compassion and healing, as you said, when we were in the hospital and about a month after his heart attack, we reached that point where we knew it was the end and knew he was about to transition. And actually, the doctors had told us it could take 1 to 2 days when they started his morphine. And so we were all sitting around his hospital bed and grieving and mourning and feeling everything. And as I was sitting there, I suddenly just got this feeling in my body, and it was the same kind of inspiration as that I had when I was writing the talk. It was just this feeling in my body of go sit with him, go hold him. And then the but what ifs came up. Oh, what's your family going to think? Like, do the doctors care that you're getting in the bed with him? Are they going to, I don't know, think you're being weird? That thought came up. And then I remembered, trust yourself, trust your body, trust your knowing. And so I stood up and got in the bed with my father and wrapped my arms around him and held him for about 10 minutes. And as I was holding him, I just heard him take his last breath. And I had said to him right before he did, I just whispered, "It's okay, Dad. It's okay to let go. We'll be okay. We'll all be okay. It's okay to let go." Um, and that's when he took his last breath. And I said to my family, "He's going. He's going now. He's going." And everyone stood up and grabbed his hands and we held him. And that, Tricia, was one of the most devastating and also beautiful moments of my life. And it's actually, I talk a lot in my work about the meaning of living with ecstasy and how to bring more ecstasy into our lives. And often, we can think of ecstasy as just passion or, being ecstatic and joyful. And that experience to me is actually the perfect illustration of what it means to live with ecstasy, because that's what I experienced in that moment of getting to hold my father while he took his last breaths, and knowing that my body told me to get up and hold him because he was going. That is the ecstasy of being so deeply connected to yourself and to God, the universe, to each other, that you can experience that kind of beauty of trusting in yourself and knowing that standing up and speaking your truth and following your truth and just following yourself is so powerful.
Thank you for sharing that in service of our listeners who may have the but ifs when they're in a situation or a circumstance where they're feeling that they shouldn't act. And this is going to give everyone listening permission to trust their own body, to learn to be fully expressed. And if they need to learn to be fully expressed, they can work with you. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. But the idea of embodying being an influential voice at one of the most devastating and simultaneously sacred moments in human form is so epic. And I just feel so grateful to be able to know you and witness you and how you showed up for your father and your family in that way. And that's modeling for your daughter as well. I mean,
Mm.
you now have this entire experience that you can share with her, about what it means to really show up fully expressed and to understand what living in ecstasy means. And I know that you're modeling that for her now. And when she's old enough for you to have those conversations, she's very lucky to have you as a mother.
Oh, that's one of the best compliments you could possibly give me, Tricia. Thank you so much for that. And to encourage the listeners with this as well, that has been a real journey to learn what living with ecstasy means. And I think it's so important when you're on this journey and exploring how you can use your voice as well, right, for impact. And using your voice is a huge part of living with ecstasy. It's a huge part of expressing yourself, right? We express ourselves with our voice. And so, to encourage the listeners, it's okay to be a journey, and it's meant to be a journey. And those but what ifs, they come up, right? The doubts or the fears, they arise, the judgments. It's not about trying to get rid of all of them and fight them and and force yourself, right, to get past them. It's about allowing it. Of course the but ifs come up, of course those come up. They were taught to you. You were taught fear, you were taught your patterns, right? They were passed down to you. They're deeply ingrained. Let them come up. And when you can allow them to come up and then not also believe them, like allow them to come up, but then keep moving forward, keep pursuing, like you said, keep remembering that you have a responsibility, right, to share and express yourself, then you get to see what you're really capable of.
So powerful. Alex, did you have any idea that this kind of transformation was going to happen when you decided to go on the journey of being a speaker?
Ooh, I'll say I believed that it was going to cause significant transformation because I've always known that I'm a deeply verbal person and that I'm meant to use my voice to express myself. So I believed that that's very connected to my purpose. And anytime you pursue your desires, your purpose, it's going to cause transformation. And that said, I had no idea all the details of the transformation and how it was going to unfold. And I had no idea how much was actually in store for me. It was a lot more than I could have imagined, which I think is the real beauty of following your desires and following your highest. Your mind, your ego, it can only relate to the past. So what your ego can create, what your mind can create, doesn't hold a candle to what your soul can when you let yourself follow what you're really desiring and called to do.
Amazing. And what is possible for you, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to see what's possible for you and know what's possible for you and simply reflect back what I see is possible for you has been such a gift. And so I want to thank you for that gift and that opportunity to support you and mentor you.
Oh, it's been amazing, Tricia. Really, you came at such a transitional season in my life that also had this big forward momentum that had been building. And so when I think even about the timing, and I'll share with our listeners, you made space for me because your client roster was full. And I know that's something you don't do often, but I had also been pursuing our work together for some time. And I remember you made the space for me because you felt like the fall was aligned for us. And I'm just realizing that in this moment, sharing my realization with your listeners, that if you hadn't have done that, I would have missed that opportunity with my dad.
Divine timing, once again.
Divine timing. Yeah.
Amazing. You are
Amazing.
such an amazing, influential voice and force for good in the world. Are you ready for some fast talk?
Yes. Let's do it.
All right. What's your favorite book, Alex?
I struggle with this question because I've read so many that I love, but I did think about it before our interview, and I'm going with Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. It was hugely influential for me in really getting some clarity around my spiritual beliefs and just deeply resonated with me.
Amazing. Who's your favorite speaker and why?
So, Tricia, I adore you so much and I love listening to your talks. And I thought, okay, I feel like I need to give an additional person on your podcast as everyone knows who you are, who's listening to your podcast. And I had to make sure I include that because I just love you and your messages so much. And another speaker I'm really enjoying right now is Kyle Cease with Evolving Out Loud. Again, just a real deep resonance with his spiritual teaching that I'm really jiving with right now.
Amazing. Thank you for both of those. I appreciate you. How do you memorize, Alex?
Well, I learned a lot about my memorizing techniques from you. So I know there's a lot people can learn throughout the podcast. I know you talk about that. And I'd love to narrow down into this one specific thing I do that I actually learned throughout our work together that now I love and incorporate it into my memorizing, which is actually to roll jujitsu rounds while doing my talk. So I've been training jujitsu for 5 years. And something I used to struggle with in my speaking is running out of breath, or that's how my nerves show up, how my body can react to that is getting heavy breathing. And so you had recommended that I practice my talk while rolling jujitsu. And it was such a powerful training exercise and helped me with the memorization. So on top of listening to the talk all the time and breaking it up into short segments and all of that, I found that's my favorite thing to do to prepare for a talk.
I love it. That is so cool. What do you do the day before you speak in preparation?
So I do a couple of Italian run-throughs of my talk, and then I'll do one or two rehearsals, full rehearsals and emotional delivery. And then for me, it's also just about trying to create a lot of space that day, being more relaxed, a little bit more creative or uplifting, like maybe dancing a little bit or meditating, like being in maybe writing if that feels aligned, but just kind of trying to be in a creative space without having a lot on my plate.
That's great. And for those of you who have not listened to the podcast or follow me, an Italian run is doing the run as fast as possible without any emotion. And then Alex used the perfect language, a rehearsal with full expression and full emotion. So the rehearsal means doing the talk as if you're in front of an audience, which is really, really great. What podcast are you currently obsessed with?
I listen to yours a lot and your episodes. And then I really mostly have been listening just to episodes that, like when I'm preparing to be on a podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate your support of my work, Alex. It really means a lot to me.
Oh, absolutely. I share you all the time, Tricia,
Oh,
with people.
thank you. This has been such a joy for me to be in conversation with you. Where can our listeners get in touch with you, Alex?
Well, I would love to offer a gift to your listeners. We've been talking a lot throughout this episode about the power of trust and learning how to accept ourselves and then also trust our divine intuition. Trust in ourselves, in the unknown, in the universe has just completely transformed my life, transforms the lives of my clients. And so it's one of my most passionate favorite topics. So I would love to share it with your listeners. I have an ebook. It's called Radical Trust: A Woman's Guide to Manifesting True Desires, Joy, and Passion. And so you can find that at alexpursglove.com/radical trust. And it will walk you through the 4 core pillars of cultivating more trust with practical, tangible action steps in how you actually start taking this from head to heart.
Amazing. I've seen this ebook. It is beautiful. And if they want to follow you online or get in touch with you, where can they do that?
Absolutely. My website, alexpursglove.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Alex Pursglove. Pretty easy to find me. I'm one of the only Alex Pursgloves out there. So you can find me online. Reach out to me, send me a message. Let me know what you took away from this episode. I love authentic human connection. So I would be happy to hear from anyone who's listening today.
Amazing. We'll put all of that in the show notes, including your speak talk, which is so beautiful. And it has been such a joy, a pleasure. I appreciate you spending time with us, Alex. And for those of you who are listening, thank you so much for spending time with us. If this episode resonates, let us know, share, rate, and review. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get access to our latest episodes. I appreciate all of you. And remember, your voice matters. Big love, everybody.